My name is Victoria, and on this channel I DIY my clothes and I share with you this process that you can make something similar. And it's finally Christmas time and I'm very excited because this year I want to make a very beautiful traditional holiday for myself with Christmas tree, with nice dinner and beautiful outfit. And for this celebration I chose a stunning vintage looking dress. I hope you will enjoy and happy holidays! This is a dress I want to make for Christmas. It looks so amazing. I love this cut. It is a wrap dress with gatherings instead of darts, and the only one change I will make, it will be the length of the sleeve. I will make it 3/4 and probably a little bit fluffier. I chose a red viscose textile. It has a little bit of elastan. And look at these gorgeous buttons. They will look so beautiful in the combination with some pearl jewelry. And I have an idea to make soon a matching lace lingerie set and to film a detailed tutorial about this. So if this thematic is interesting for you, please subscribe. You are always welcome on my channel. I will make this pattern by myself on the base of a basic dress pattern. So this is a model of a basic dress made of cotton. It is a first trial before any adjustments. I do not like the position of my front body dart, but for this dress it doesn't matter. Check that back sits good, that you have enough room for your breasts, and if your armhole not so tight. I need to make mine a little bit bigger. Here you can see back and front bodice patterns. I will leave my back like it is, with shoulder and waist darts. This summer I already started working on this dress, and then I made my first prototype. There I had an idea to make back double-layered yoke and to get rid in this way of my shoulder darts. But this time I will leave everything like it is, and I just decided to add 5mm height to the neckline. About front bodice. It is made out of two details. The upper detail, I think it's yoke, and main basic piece with overlap. It is very useful to have basic dress prototype made out of cheap cotton, because you can draw on it with your textile marker and you can find details shape that you like. So I know from what point on the shoulder seam I want my yoke started and more or less the angle. And I do not forget that I added 5mm to the neckline. Now is the moment of the overlap. I draw a straight line to the side. I want my overlap to be around 10 cm. And then I make a straight line to the front yoke. My middle point will be exactly on the breast level. Now I will change the position of my side breast dart from horizontal to vertical. It will give me the possibility to make gathering on the top. So I just draw a vertical line from the top of my dart. I make 2 cuts to close side dart and to open upper dart. So now I have a possibility to make gatherings instead of the darts on the top and bottom of the front bodice. I just will balance the size of my darts. I will make it a little bit bigger than it is now on the bottom and smaller on the top. I totally forgot that I have a belt. My belt will be 3 cm wide, so I need to cut off 1.5 cm from the bottom of the front bodice pattern and of the back bodice pattern. Another important moment is this edge length. This seam, this edge, will go a little bit in between my breasts. So the length of this edge should be on 1-2 cm shorter, not to create some extra space, some pocket in the area of my breasts. In my case, I subtract 1.5 cm and made a smooth line to the beginning of my overlap. Now you can see all bodice details I need to cut. 2 front bodice parts, 3 cm wide front facing. It will stabilize this edge and prevent it from deformation. Then back bodice pattern, 4 cm wide back collar facing, and belt. The length of my belt is equal to my waist measurement plus 2 cm for some ease. About sleeve. I will make some gatherings on the sleeve cap and on the sleeve hem. This type of a sleeve calls peasant sleeve. I was trying to make some gatherings on a piece of textile to visualize how it will look. So to add some volume to my basic sleeve pattern, I need to make a few vertical cuts and to open them wide. I want to add to the sleeve cap some extra 4.5 centimeters and 10 centimeters to the hem. Here you can see how the prototype looks. I'm satisfied with this volume. I will have a 2 cm wide sleeve cuff. My pattern will be 4 cm wide without seam allowances because I will fold it. For the length, I will take the measure around the widest section of my lower arm. Okay, what changes I will make with my skirt? Here you can see a basic skirt pattern. I added overlap to my front skirt. I just will make a cut down from the top of my front and back darts, and then I just open them wide. I found out that I can create a nice looking gatherings on my skirt when I make my waist edge 50% longer. I do not forget about a warp thread direction when I will position my pattern on the textile. The skirt overlap needs front facing as well to avoid from future deformation. I will make it 4 cm wide. I do not go too deep into details in this video, otherwise this video will be a few hours long. Plus, I think you already need to have some basic sewing knowledges to make this project. For example, how to position your details on the textile or why do we need back facing. But I will try to give you as much information and as compact as it possible. I added 1 cm seam allowances to my details. My skirt is around 80 cm long plus 3-4 cm for the hem. My front yoke and belt will be double layered. So I started to work with my cutted pieces and I understood that I chose rather complicated textile. It is viscose with some % of elastane and I thought it will make no difference. But some cuts that were cutted with some angle, they start to deformate while I'm shifting this piece from one location to another. So on this stage, stabilizing all cuts that somehow can deformate is dramatically important for me. And I will show you what cuts I stabilized in which way, so I hope it will work in the end. So now I've used interfacing to my sleeve cuffs, my belt, both layers, front bodice and skirt facing, and to back collar facing. Use cloth in between and press 10 seconds without steam. I was making a long research about what edges I need to stabilize because I still feel myself a little bit shaky with the schematic. And I was thinking maybe there are some clear rules where I have to use fusible interfacing and where I have to use stabilizing fusible bands. And with jackets and coats there are much clearer rules than with dresses, because dresses have different styles, they have different textile varieties. And if to sum all that advices I get, they will sound more like listen to your heart, and it makes me so nuts. Yeah, while working you should concentrate and to use cloth in between. Fail. So I had to cut a new facing. I decided to change warp thread direction because my previous detail was cut with another direction and very much deformating. By the way, I used around 2.5 meters of the textile for this midi dress with my 36-38 size. I will use fusible stabilizing bands for my skirt and body's overlap. Here I use a band for a straight edge, and I've used this to the wrong side of my seam allowance. More detailed information you can find in my previous video about silk slip dress. There I was showing how to make these bands by yourself from a fusible interfacing. I will link this video down below. I stabilized collar edge as well. I used band for a curvy edge. And about my front yoke. I stabilized only one of 2 layers to avoid some extra thickness. I combined 2 types of bands because I have straight and curvy areas. I overlocked the edge of my back and front facings, and I ironed these details after. Now I will attach front facing to the skirt overlap and to my front bodice. I will make a straight stitch. The most comfortable way to work is when facing detail faces down. Now I need to position my seam allowance to the side of the back facing, and then I make a straight stitch over the seam allowance and facing 1 mm from the seam. You can use a special presser foot for this or a regular one. Now you can see that this procedure gives a beautiful edge from the front of the garment. I just will iron this carefully, avoiding pressing far from the edge. I don't want that my seam allowance inside prints to the front. I attached facing to my front bodice and I instantly made my side skirt seams. Now I will make my back bodice darts. I accurately pinned them, I made a back stitch at the beginning and I stitched towards the dart tip. The last few stitches I went close to the edge to make a smooth curve and to avoid sharp angle. Of course, the best way to finish a dart is not to make a back stitch, but to stitch off the fabric and to tie off the ends before clipping them down. I did not make that, but I forgive myself any imperfection at 1 AM. Then I ironed my darts, first flat, then to the center of the back. Okay, it's a new day and today I plan to finish my dress. The next step will be to make a gathering on the front bodice, on the waistline and on the upper seam that connects to the yoke, or maybe it's already collar, I even do not know how to call this. And I instantly will make gathering on the sleeve cap and on the sleeve hem before making underarm seam. And after this I will start to collect all the parts of the dress bodice. So let's go! I will start with my front bodice. I adjusted a length of 1 stitch for the maximum and then I made a straight stitch 8 mm from the edge with my 1 cm seam allowance. I do not make any back stitching and I leave long thread ends. Now I need to pull one thread from one side. It will create gatherings. Then I just redistribute them in the way I like. I look at the reference photo because I want to have similar result. And I compare the length of the edge to the pattern. The upper edge to the yoke pattern, I do remember that my pattern has no seam allowances. I compare my lower edge to the belt pattern. And I do not make gatherings on my overlap. The length of a sleeve hem I compare to the length of my sleeve cuff detail. When I reach right length on each detail, I just pull all threads to the wrong side of the detail and fix them with a knot. Now nothing will shift or stretches and I can easily work with my detail. Okay, about sleeve cap. I make a straight stitch only where gathering needed, plus few centimeters. Here I instantly made a knot on one side. I also have notch marks on my sleeve cap that shows the borders of my gatherings. All this curve in between is 4.5 centimeters longer from the standard pattern. I have some marks on my standard pattern as well. These are places where I made cuts to manipulate my pattern. And now it is very easy to match these marks and we have a right length and perfect gatherings. I hope you understood what I meant. Now comes the fun part. I need to collect all the parts of my bodice, and honestly it took me a while to figure out the sequence of actions. You can see all the details of my bodice, most of them facing up with the right side. My yoke has double layer. The lower layer has stabilized edge, and I marked with chalk crosses wrong sides of details. Our first step is to attach lower yoke to the back collar facing, like this, right side to the right side. And I will make a straight stitch from the corner of this pinned edge to the end of my back collar facing. I instantly will attach upper yoke to the back bodice right side to the right side, and I will make a shoulder seam just with a straight stitch. I go to iron my seams flat, and then I iron my seam allowance to the yoke side. The same procedure here. I need to iron my seam allowance to the front. The next step. Here I have a gathered front piece. Now I need to connect this piece to my yoke. I position them right side to the right side, matching a notch mark on the yoke. And now I will attach them with a hand stitch. Now I cover this detail with my back-facing piece. I need to pin together these details and to make a straight stitch 1 cm from the edge. I worry a little bit about this shoulder knot. There are 6 layers of the textile, and it looks a little bit too thick. I'm not sure if I'm doing the right thing, but I will trim this layer 2 mm from the seam, just like this for 2 cm. Yeah, the thickness looks fine. Now I need to position my seam allowance to the back layer and to make a straight stitch 1 mm from the seam. It is the same principle as I was doing earlier with the front facing. Now I will make my seam allowance a little bit shorter, and I will make some cuts all along the edge that it would be easier to turn around this detail, otherwise it will not stay flat. I have already ironed previous seam and now it looks very accurate. And now I need to close my shoulder seam by hand. It is possible to make this from inside with a sewing machine, from the side of the armhole, but I would definitely stretch my armhole. Now I will go to iron this shoulder seam. It is time to make side seams and underarm seams. First a straight stitch, then an overlock. After this I will iron my side seams to the front and underarm seam to the back. I pinned my sleeve to the armhole and made a temporary hand stitch. And now we can make a straight stitch on my sewing machine from the side of a sleeve. After this I overlocked the seam. I was doubting if I should show this detailing, and I made a shortcut. If someone of you are interested in this mini lesson, please let me know down in the comments. If there would be at least a dozen of you, I will post this part on YouTube, or you can Google. I ironed only my overlocked seam allowance, and I was very careful not to iron my gathering splat. It is time of my sleeve cuffs. At first I need to make a straight stitch to create a circle. Then to iron my seam allowance like this. And then to iron this cuff in a half. There were 2 ways how I could attach my sleeve cuff to the sleeve. I could attach this cuff to the sleeve like this and just to overlock the edge, but it does not look so well with the fluffiness of my sleeve, so I decided for another technology. It gives me a possibility to make a beautiful closed seam. I unfolded the cuff
and I ironed my 1 cm seam allowance inside like this. This is a right side of a ready sleeve cuff. And now I fold my detail like this. The seam allowance from another side, from the wrong side. I fold over the edge and I iron this edge another time. It makes one side of the cuff around 2 mm longer. You can see this very good when I fold the detail. Now I will attach my sleeve cuff to my sleeve hem with a straight stitch following this first fold line. It must pass directly along the fold. But before the next step, I need to reduce the thickness of my seam allowance with an ironing. I fold my construction, and now I will make a straight stitch from the right side directly along the fold. And from the wrong side, the seam will be 2 mm from the edge of the cuff. I use my regular presser foot and I go very slowly to make this as accurate as possible. Looks good. So my sleeve cuffs are done. It is belt time. I checked another time the notch marks on my belt details. They are very important. And I added another patch from the fusible interfacing on the inner belt. It is a place where a hidden button will be attached. I pinned front belt detail to my bodice, right side to the right side. I am matching my notch marks on the bodice and on the belt. I will make a temporary hand stitch all along the edge, because I want to be sure that my gatherings look good. After this, I cover this edge with the inner belt detail, like this. Now I need to make a straight stitch starting from this point. It is 10-12 mm from the edge. Then down to the corner, rotate, along the entire length of the belt, another time to rotate, and I need to stop 10-12 mm before the end. I ironed my seam allowance, and now to have a possibility to turn over this belt, I need to cut off the corner close to the seam. It is around 2 mm from the seam, like this. It was too hard to iron the seam accurately because my belt was trying to unfold. So I made a hand stitch through 2 layers of the belt and through the seam allowance. And now I'm ironing this seam very carefully, only with the top of the iron, because I do not want that my stitches print to my textile. The next step. Here my bodice faces wrong side up. Now I do a similar thing I was doing with my sleeve cuffs. I need to iron my front belt seam allowance, 1 cm seam allowance, inside like this. Now you can see why I did not stitch till the end. Now I can fold this edge inside and to make the next step. Now I need to bend another side over the edge and to iron the seam allowance another time. I would recommend to make a little bit wider seam allowance for the belt because it was not so comfortable for me to work with 1 cm seam allowance. This is my skirt. I already overlocked side seam allowances and ironed them to the front. I made my gatherings and now I will attach the skirt to the front belt, right side to the right side.
You know, one of the worst things that could happen to me while sewing is the spinal lock. And I have one. I cannot rotate my neck. Ugh.
But back to work. At first I connected everything with a hand stitch. I do not like to stitch over pins when I have gatherings. And then I just follow the fold. Another ironing, and I close my belt the same way I was doing with my sleeve cuffs. Just this time I will make at first a temporary hand stitch for higher accuracy and then with a sewing machine from the right side directly into the fold. Well, it looks perfect. Now I can remove my temporary stitches. Okay, now I need to make button loops and to attach buttons. I have 3 buttons on my overlap plus 1 hidden button. I was checking my button loops on the piece of textile to understand from what edge distance I need to position them. My button is 22 mm wide and pretty standard on the back, and I find out that I need to start my loop 1 cm from the edge. The distance in between my button loops is 8 cm. Another step I need to make before making the loops. I have 1 cm wide seam allowance inside, and it can happen that my needle will jump from one thickness to another, and in the end it will look not so good. And to prevent this, I will cut a dent on the seam allowance in these places. Now comes a very standard procedure. I make a buttonhole from one side of the belt and from another side for my hidden button. I pulled my threads to the wrong side, made a knot for extra security and hid the ends in between stitches. With the position of my belt buttons, everything is clear. I know the width of my overlap. But to find out the position of my 2 lower buttons, I need to wear my dress first and to look how my overlap falls on the gatherings and to make some marks. After I sewed the buttons, I started working on the hem of the skirt. I put the dress on the mannequin and with the help of a long ruler, put marks at the same height around the hem. I cut off the excess and overlocked the edge. I ironed my 3 cm hemming allowance, and now I can make a straight stitch or a hidden stitch. There are multiple ways how to finish the hem. Yeah, too much overlock for my taste. So I fold this overlocked edge inside and sewed everything by hand. The last step. I sewed my front and back facing to the dress like this. And that's all. This dress is ready. I honestly love the result. The only change I would make is that front yoke, in my case, needs a layer of a fusible interfacing for a crisp edge. But for my first dress with sleeves and my first project with gatherings, I think the result is great. If you liked this dress, enjoyed the process or found out some new information, click the like button. It would make me happier. And we see each other in the next video.